In 2020, the United Kingdom left the European Union in a process that the media called Brexit. The media told the UK population that it was about getting sovereignty back, get rid of all these foreigners. It was a total scam. This is why I think it's a scam, and these are my personal views. I hope you find them interesting. First, a bit of background over 2 or 3 slides. The European Economic Community (EEC) was formed by these 6 countries in 1957, and it was to help through trade to bring on and repair the damage done to the economy in the Second World War, which ended in 1945. The United Kingdom joined the EEC on the 1st of January. You can see the original 6 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. And these 3 countries joined in January 73. And then the EEC evolved due to the number of members it had to the European Union, and that was founded in 1993. As you can see, it had grown quite a lot in that time, and that was the Maastricht Treaty. And the UK played a good, strong part in creating the legislation for that treaty. We were proactive. So here's the European Union in 2025. The countries in the dark purple are full members. The light coloured are members in going through the process of aligning themselves to the European laws and European rules, some faster than others. The EU is huge. Excluding Britain now, it has a population of 450 million people, which is 5.5% of the population of the world. Only China and India have population blocks that work as a trade unit larger than the European Union. So there's 27 full members with 9 countries in the process of joining. On top of that, there's 3 EFTA countries, which is Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein, and also Switzerland on top of that have their own agreement with the European Union. All these people have free customs union. They have free services and goods transfer and people movement. The EU turnover in 25 was 38 trillion euros. The EFTA countries 1.35 trillion, Switzerland 2.22 trillion. So that's a total market of 42.27 trillion euros. The population is 474 million, including EFTA and Switzerland. The UK left that. It left, and all these countries put up tariffs because we were what the EU call a third country. Why would you damage your country economically, deliberately? But that's what Brexit did. It was done on purpose for the benefit of the few. Legislatively, as I mentioned earlier, the UK has played a strong part in creating legislation within the EEC and EU. But despite this, there's elements of the Conservative Party that were always against it. It's all these Johnny foreigners which they weren't too happy about. The UK media over the last few decades rarely report European affairs. Think about the UK media now. If it isn't America or Britain, what is there? You might get another event for a week or 2 that happens, but that's it. They're not interested in Europe. It's a psyche thing. The Conservative Party in 2010, when they came to power, raised immigration as a problem and set ridiculous targets that could never be met. And they built and started to build anti-immigration rhetoric into the UK society. UKIP was founded in 1993 as a small party against the European Union. Suddenly it had more money. Where did it come from? Suddenly they were getting lots of information and visibility in the media. I'm going to talk now about EU legislation to make you understand where this scam came from. The EU in 2009 created a new law called Article 63, and it was to make it easier economically and procedurally for the countries of the EU to work together, and it clarified and included the free movement of people, goods, services and capital. It allowed for the possibility to restrict capital movements in specific conditions should any country have a financial problem and temporarily wanted to restrict capital movement. In time, the EU started talking about common monetary union. Earlier in the 90s, they brought in the euro. And the bank, because there was more money around EU money, the euro, controls were starting to tighten up. Obviously, the powers that be in the UK, government, banks, the wealthy, were worried about this. You'll see why in a second. And they started the campaign that would eventually lead to Brexit. The wealthy elites and businesses within the UK move capital around all the time, in and out. The UK has tax havens, which helps them in that. The UK has 40% of the world's tax havens. Article 63 of the treaty on the functioning of the EU actually prohibits restrictions on capital movement and payments within the EU, but also out with the EU. However, this is the however, further provisions in the treaty stipulate a number of exceptions to the principle of free movement of capital, in particular to prevent problems related to taxation, proper supervision of financial institutions, public policy and security. The Bank of England would worry here that the increase of the central bank would actually stop them having the controls that they perceived they would have. They're forgetting that nothing comes in the EU because Britain had a veto. Anything we didn't agree with, like everybody else, we could have stopped. And this is a scam. The message to the population of the UK to justify Brexit was a loss of sovereignty and foreigners taking your jobs. This was a total lie. We had no loss of sovereignty. We went in there voluntarily, and the UK government had the right to stop any laws it didn't agree with. As for foreigners, at the time when the Brexit campaign was building up for the vote, unemployment was 3.8%. That's low, and that included the 3.5 million Europeans that worked in the country. There was no immigration problem. It was purely hype, and that's the scam. Brexit was to protect the controls within the UK banking system, but also to protect tax avoidance schemes by the wealthy and companies within our society. And they manipulated society and they lied to us to get us, the majority of us, just a small majority, to support Brexit. Before I continue, I want to talk a little bit more. What happened after the Brexit campaign started within the EU on capital controls? Bear in mind the referendum was 2016 and we left in 2020. Were the elites and the Bank of England correct to be worried? In July 18, the EU clarified enforcement guidelines for capital movement, which was clarified again in 2019. This was to make capital movement within the EU safe for all, safe for the people. There was another addition to the Article 63 law, which came into force in 2022, and it still applies to relevant tax laws that distinguish between taxpayers based in their own country and the location of their investment. It's looking at people moving money without paying tax. Today, Germany, France and Denmark, it's a criminal offence to take money out of the country. You can do it, but you have to pay the tax due in that country for that money before you take it out. Can you see why the elites and the banks are worried? Because suddenly we couldn't really use tax havens. Suddenly there was the potential to make you pay your due tax instead of avoiding it and damaging the country that you're in. The EU does not allow tax havens in the sense of sanctioning them. Rather, it actively identifies non-cooperation third country jurisdictions, which, when we were in the EU, that would be the tax havens that the UK used out with the EU. And it puts restrictions on those, and that's continuing. And that was from 2025. So they were correct to be worried in the trend coming. So from the wealthi's point of view and the companies, Brexit was a good thing for them. If you look on the internet and you ask how much money goes out to the tax havens, you'll find out that between 40 and 50 billion every year in tax revenue is lost to the UK Chancellor of the Exchequer. Do you not think that's ridiculous? So what caused Brexit? The Bank of England saw a loss of control on its operations as a possibility in the future as the EU went down the financial integration route. Over my life, there's been various articles in newspapers about banks and financial institutions breaking international law, money laundering and so on. I'm not saying the Bank of England has or does. It's just a thought. Why would the Bank of England be against more control of what was going on with regards to tax and capital? The wealthy elites foresaw the risk of increased taxation and loss of movement of capital in specific scenarios, for example, to the UK's tax havens. Some of them, some groups, started to pressure the government. UKIP got money. They got a charismatic leader. And it brought to prominence and pressurised the Conservative Party. The UK media, most of it owned by America, were in on the act. Subtle, but there nevertheless. And the rest is history. The Conservatives panicked about UKIP and loss of votes, and they called a Brexit referendum in 2016. The Remain side was never supported in the media, never supported by business groups like the CBI, never supported strongly by the government of the day. So the UK media, American-owned mostly, talked up the Brexiteers, as the Remain side said very little. What are the losses? Still, today, and before Brexit, 40 to 50 billion pound of tax money is lost by the tax system in the UK, allowing people to take capital out without paying the taxes they are due to the Exchequer. At the moment, we're told that the country is nearly bankrupt and we have no money. This is one way to get it. The Labour Party have a huge majority. They could, if they wanted to, stop this. The last figures in 25 said that the UK at the moment is losing 100 billion a year. So there's 140 billion that's lost. In January 26, the National Farmers Union highlighted that the farming sector had declined 37% when you compared it with January 2020. That means the farming sector, they've lost jobs, lost money, and that's across all industries, fishing, everything. On the 25th of February, just a few days from when I'm recording this, the EU will implement a new law that all purchases for businesses over a specific size and all government departments across the whole of Europe must only purchase goods or services from within the EU unless they can justify why not. In other words, they can't find a supplier or a manufacturer within Union. The focus is on European jobs and the use of capital within Europe. This applies to military hardware as well. They're stopping buying American weapons. The EU sets rules on quality standards. We're outside now, but we still have to comply with these because the EU, despite the fact we've lost some, is still our biggest trading partner. And the EU is growing all the time and brings new laws, meaning it's harder and harder for Britain to keep up and obey. So the scam basically is this was done for the wealthy, for the businesses, perhaps the Bank of England. This is my opinion, but I'm sure you can think of no other reason why it would be possible. Certainly it wasn't immigration, and it certainly wasn't sovereignty. I'm now going to give you 2 slides as a one-off, off-the-wall conspiracy theory, and it's mine. Well, before Brexit, the big American tech companies were getting a bit upset at EU laws restricting their activities due to EU privacy legislation. Today, if you've been paying attention over the last year or two, you'll see that European countries have been suing these big tech companies of billions for misuse. So the tech companies and American business want to remove the restrictions which exist in Europe to protect its people and its privacy. It's my belief that some of these American companies and the American government are using coercion to do these things. In 2025, a couple of senior American people from the American government and administration actually came here on the pretext of talking to our government. But while they were here, they were talking to Tommy Robertson, UKIP, Reform and right-wing parties. This is before 2016 and also last year, 2025. Today, Reform, or renamed UKIP, are still going on about immigration and fascist policies. Yes, we've had a lot more coloured people coming into the country, but they are replacing the millions of Europeans that left. There are no extra people in the UK compared with 2016. America and the American government now, Musk as well, are supporting Hungary and Slovakia, who have right-wing parties, the German Nazi Party and the UK right-wing parties. They don't like the controls within Europe that impinges their trade. Donald Trump, the US president from 2016 to 20, and then recently, he supports these things aggressively. The America First thing. America First isn't new. It started in 1947. I believe that some of the push to do these things comes from America to disrupt Europe because it impinges on profit taking and money controls for America. Well, that's the end of my talk. I hope it maybe raised a question and an eyebrow and made you think. Thank you. But before you go, that's my channel at the top, Robert Anderson 9116 on YouTube. And that's all the videos I've created. If you're happy with this and you think that there's an interest in these videos here, I would appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel. This is my plan for the future. I had planned to talk about an update a year after the Liberation of Scotland's UN submission that Scotland is a colony of England. I haven't got all the information I need, so coming next is going to be one called Scotland, a sovereign territorial nation. There'll be a few interesting things in there to educate you, but also raise an eyebrow. I'm then going to add another Brexit one, 10 different damages that Brexit economically is doing to the UK. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.